I would like to start with the question, what is your frame on AGI safety? What is the frame on AGI safety that drives how you come up with research priorities? And I think I'll just go this way.
Sure, yeah. I think I guess there's a lot of different levels to answer this question at. I think one question is sort of, what's the goal we should be aiming for? So I'm definitely in the camp where we want to be aiming for something like corrigibility. Like I think Rowan did a pretty good job explaining that. Like we want to make systems which, in some sense, are trying to do the best they can to help us, rather than learning the perfect values to optimize for. I guess another.
So one way of saying what drives your research priorities is that you start from the goal,
right?
And then you're like, okay, what are the problems that we need to solve in order to get that goal? And your goal is a very top-level goal of like we want AGI to go really well in the future.
Yeah. So I think that I'm a pretty big fan of this sort of top-down approach where we're sort of saying what's the big goal, and then let's try to write down as much of a description of how we could train safe AGI and safe powerful AI systems, and then see what's missing, right? Like which pieces there are we missing? What constraints that top level goal put on
the strategy could be like write a safe AGI and then see where you get stuck.
Yeah.
Scott, do you have a version of what drives your research priorities?
Yeah. So I guess first the kind of question that I feel like I'm trying to answer. Like the way that I define AGI safety is similar to the way that I would define like car safety. When you talk about car safety, you have roughly these like two camps, or these two clusters of possible outcomes. There's like the car crashes and people die, and there's like you get where you're going and the car doesn't crash. And we don't focus on things like how comfortable the car is, stuff like that. So it's this top level, like, there's two different clusters of outcomes. And the main thing that like the word safety means to me is something like, how do we like affect the probability of which of these clusters we end up in? And this might not be the same as like actually what is good, because there might be important things that are where we end up within each cluster. But like the way I think of safety is like, which cluster do we end up in? How do we affect the probability of which cluster we end up in?
So what I hear there is an important, there's like catastrophic outcomes, like avoiding catastrophic outcomes is one of the things that's driving you. And when we try to predict the future in like what is going to happen with AGI, we don't know what's going to happen. There's like the future is very uncertain, but we can discern some structure, and the structure tells us like there may be many catastrophic outcomes over here, and there may be like ways to avoid catastrophic outcomes altogether over here, and we want to try to shift the probability of getting over there.
Yeah. And then, like after like when I'm like trying to answer the question, like in my day-to-day, a lot of the way in which I'm approaching like how to do this involves trying to steer into the parts of the things that I'm thinking about, parts of the problem that feel the least crystallized to me and feel the most confusing, and kind of try to like always kind of push in the direction of noticing when I'm confused and try to like open that up. So I think much more forward chainy as opposed to backward chainy.
Right. Yeah. Daniel was telling us about backward chaining from the goal, and now what I hear from you is curiosity driven. Like, where am I most confused? Plug away at that. Eric, would you like to tell us what drives your research?
My background is in engineering, and engineers do work by backward chaining from goals. So that's very much my orientation. And I see AI safety as a problem of finding safe paths from where we are to the kind of future that we're looking for. And that means paying attention to how AI systems are being developed today, which is from research and development processes, what they do, which is bounded tasks and bounded time with bounded resources, what I think of as providing services. Noticing that those services can include the service of developing new services as we move forward to higher level AI, and that is a form of general intelligence. If you have a general ability to develop new services, that's a general ability to construct systems that perform new tasks. And further, this frame, the AI services model, if you look at the world through that lens, it's possible to see how we can move toward asymptotically recursive improvement in a way that is compatible with the problems, the limitations that Joshua has emphasized. This places the intelligence, the flexible ability to generate new kinds of systems at the system level, not inside a box, but inside an increasingly automated research and development system. And this just provides a different context for thinking about a wide range of approaches to AI safety. I tend to say all of the above. AI services is about services. Stuart has emphasized that you'd like systems to perform tasks for people. That's sort of baked into the cake of the description of AI services. Stuart is examining how do we get systems to do that. That's part of an AI services research agenda. And one can frame pretty much everything that people are doing as something that fits into this general picture, something that I think can be understood better, sets priorities better, shows new affordances, new problems, if viewed through this lens.
So I'd say that what you're doing is, having noticed that the AGI safety or AI safety community has a particular frame on how they approach the whole problem and how that does not match what you see happening in the world, then that's kind of given you the research priority of articulate and explain a different frame, or like the discrepancy between the two views, the agent-focused view and the services-focused view.
Yes, and to see agents more as products and to recognize that human-level intelligence gives us super intelligent level performance, intelligent systems that can get us to the moon, but they're systems of people who are relatively specialized and are in effect providing services to organizations and society. So it puts a focus on the system level.
Okay, thank you. Anca, what drives your research priority?
I think I'm somewhat aligned, at least at the high level, with what Eric was saying. I have to confess that I work on AGI safety as a bit of a side effect of working on getting things like robots and maybe more and more capable AIs to do the things that we want them to do. I get to AGI safety only because I imagine as capability improve, you hit these problems that we're already hitting just more and more and more. So, but I tend to work on cars, and it turns out that when you try to write an objective function for a car, eventually when it optimizes that, you hit some sort of edge case where it doesn't do what you want, and then you say, oh man, I didn't think about this other thing, let me add it into the objective, and then you rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
Then I work on robots that move around people.
So I hear what you're saying is like, start with applications, or like, what is the next interesting thing that we might want AI-based systems to do, and with a view to like, we might want to scale these up in capability quite far in the future. What kinds of things are going wrong now that are relevant to that, and how do we fix them?
A little bit, maybe I'd rephrase it as, I mainly try to get robots to do stuff.
Right.
They're not doing it very well, and part of the problem is very similar to the kind of problem I would anticipate that more and more capable AI systems would also have.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to open it to the audience to now just give your thoughts or comments or questions for the panel. I'm not necessarily, and the panel, feel free to jump in if you think you're interested in a question, but no obligation.
Hey, thanks for the good introductions. My question is mostly for Scott, I think. I'm curious what you have thought of, if you can describe kind of qualitatively, what are some patterns of things that underlie catastrophic risks or existential risks?
Could we get like a few
very,
questions?
very high level or low level?
I think I'm going to take the no pressure invite.
Yeah, so I think what Tanya was asking about is like, what are the details of things that you're confused about, but like we can get to that perhaps a bit later. Anyone else have questions or comments on what people have said?
Yeah, I have a question about these two paradigms, the agent-based paradigm for AI or AGI, and the service-based paradigm. There might be something in between or something different, which is the extended AI or the extended human paradigm, so where we have very coupled services, so they are not decoupled from us. They are so coupled with us that maybe humans, we might become a danger or a risk. Do you have that as part of the service, or as another variant of the agent-based situation?
So I have a view on that, which is like I'm very interested in kind of extending the power of all of the humans by kind of building better and better tools. And I see this as compatible with Eric's model, which is like we're, as a civilization, going towards like building better and better automated tools. And this can be seen as AGI. But I think the point that Eric is making, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, is that when you think about the safety problems, if you take a frame of like, we're going to make a single agent safe, that's very different from thinking about we're going to be dealing with a world in which there are many tools that we can call on, and something unsafe might happen as a result of those interactions.
Yes, if you can make an agent safe, you haven't made the world safe. The world isn't necessarily adopting all of your safety procedures, and they aren't necessarily pursuing goals that are aligned with yours. One of the services, a service for someone else might be to kill you.
Yeah.
That's a service. A service of a system might be to give you what you want, but really didn't want, an addictive service.
Yeah. Can we get another audience question?
Can I add a thing
Right.
to
Oh,
it?
sure.
I think another variant of what you were suggesting is what Dylan was saying in his talk, which is come up with a definition of rationality, what we mean by an agent. That's really not just the agent itself and a box around it, but really a human-robot system, because ultimately that's what we're trying to build.
Yeah.
So I would like to jump like one level up meta and ask you a question that I struggle myself quite a bit, is how do you scale the AI safety ecosystem in terms of number of insights that it produces? So like to the degree that you have thought about it, like what are your thoughts?
And can we get David as well?
Okay, so my question is sort of, I understood the prompt of this panel to be like, what is the most important thing to work on?
Right.
Just sort of like this Hamming question of like, you know, what is the low-hanging fruit, what's most important and neglected? And then you can ask the follow-up of like, why aren't you working on it? So I'm curious to hear people's thoughts about that.
So like, what is your Hamming question? What is your Hamming problem with regards to AGI safety?
Yeah, so in particular, like what is most neglected and what is like most important to work on right now, given all of the context and circumstance that we're in?
Scott, did you want to say something to Jan's question?
Yeah, I think I have something I want to say to both questions.
Great.
I want to point out something about the picture of like how do we scale up is actually very complicated, related to like incentives within researchers and such. There's a thing that I spend a lot of my time doing that might, from a view of like how do we scale up, be viewed as like defecting against this like scaling up system, where I'm like very focused on like getting my own understanding better and getting the understanding of like my local team better, and like not like focusing on like writing papers that would like enable other people to be able to get a bunch of stuff too. I think I'm making the right choice there, but like, I don't know. And I think that there's like a lot of benefits that are coming out of that, not just in how much it affects my time, but also in whether or not I'm creating an incentive in myself to be able to like create the kind of output that other people would approve of. And like, when you're thinking about scaling up, there's this counter thing, which is like, there's actually some benefits to silos in how they allow you to be able to think.
I think Jan's question was, as I understood Jan's question, it was like, what are the generators for more AGI safety progress on the planet? And Scott is saying like, well, there's kind of two views on that. One of the views is that we need more AGI safety researchers. We need ways to like train them up and make them do stuff, and we need them to communicate their ideas and get better at like building a common shared knowledge of what the problem is and what the solutions are. And there's another view, which is that AGI safety is a really difficult problem, and we need like the solutions and the problem to be understood really well in at least a few heads in order to make like progress of the form of knowledge building. And that's what I hear Scott saying is like, I'm ignoring all of this part in order to concentrate all my efforts on like making an incremental step in fundamental knowledge.
Maybe I can give a different kind of answer to that question, which is, I think we, might be at an exciting point where we're able to leverage more kinds of talent and a wider range of people's abilities for answering at least certain kinds of AGI safety questions. So like, on the OpenAI safety team, we're starting to do a lot more concrete experiments with like sort of trying to write down roughly what could a system look like that could produce safe AGI if we scaled it up, and then just doing experiments with that. And that's somewhere where we can use ML engineers and people that aren't necessarily up for doing this sort of really high level conceptual progress, but instead just want to write some code. I think we can use social scientists for answering some of the questions about how do things like debate play out in practice. Like if we have this zero-sum game set up between two agents and a human as a judge, like what norms can we set up so that this debate is like maximally truth-seeking and helpful? So I think there's a lot of room for including more and more people.
Yeah, so I hear in that there's kind of like, there's a portfolio approach to AGI safety. Like we don't understand the problem, but we have like many different frames and hooks on it. And some of them are more amenable to bringing researchers in right now, or even bringing engineers in right now, and just like give us some empirical evidence for these kinds of questions. And like this will help us drive the research agenda. And so I agree with that. And I think like it's good to have some silos. It's good to have some people working very hard on very deep technical problems. And then it's also good to have like a bunch of exploration of what the different possibilities are. Yeah. I'd like to add something to that.
Okay, I think maybe related or building on everything that was said, I can't help myself with saying this, but we're maybe not doing a great job tapping into all of the folks doing AI research and robotics research who largely think that we're here talking about the Terminator and robot apocalypse as opposed to talking about clearly stated technical problems. So I think, in a sense, if we communicated better about what those concrete technical problems were and why they're important, we might do a better job getting more people excited about it and therefore make more progress.
So just on like David Kruger's question earlier on like what is your having problem, what do you think is the most important thing to work on? And you, like Anca, in the position of like I'm going to communicate what the technical problems are, which is the most important problem you would work on, and like how would you communicate?
Yeah, so let me give a little bit of context on that, which relates to also how do you then communicate these things, right? What are the technical problems? And I think part of my approach so far has been to say, people are working on building technology X. Let me play this game where I assume that they've done a good job and that's done. What is the next problem that I see? So that's kind of my generator for technical problems in AI safety. Right, the first one was, some optimization or RL works enough. What's the problem? Okay, well, the objective, we have no idea how to write it down. And then, we did those things like Searle and so on with Stewart and Dillon. And I think if we assume that we can do a good job at that, then my next thing, which is the thing that I'm very excited about right now, is how do you define a good space of objective functions or of constraints or whatever to begin with? I mean, I think when Rohan was talking about that you could either say, I want to do what's good, or I want to satisfy these constraints that avoid catastrophe, I think it's a bit of a red herring to say that those are actually different things and one is easier than the other. They're both really hard to specify. And I think with trying to do that, you get two challenges. One is, what are good human models that help us link what people do and all the information we get from people to these things that are in their heads? Yeah. But maybe number two is, what is the hypothesis space? And that's something that I tend to struggle with. What's
what you're talking about there, I think, is something close to what I'm very interested in, which is kind of specification problems. Like, how do we even write down what we want, and what are the different ways of doing that? It's related to that. Did you have something to say on the topic of...
I would actually like to tie together what Dave was saying and Jan a little bit. So Dave was asking, what's most important? So I would ask, which is more important, your heart, your lungs, or your liver? We need all of these in a car. Which is more important, the steering wheel, the engine, the brakes? And if you look through the lens of the services model, you see many kinds of systems, many kinds of problems, many different ways, affordances for addressing problems. You were saying, assuming that various problems are solved, what are other problems? I think we should assume in many contexts that someone out there is able to build a good predictive model of human concerns that can be, it's not an agent, it's a predictive model, but can serve as an advisory oracle to systems that are acting in the world. So just very generally, there are many different kinds of problems. Human skills and interests are not fungible. There's a lot of surface area on this problem. And I think what's most important in this immediate context is to look at the broader context and for people to think about the fit between this broad problem space and their interests with the right weighting of concerns and context.
Yeah, so I'd like to get a comment from, sorry, I'd like
to.
Okay, let's go with the response first.
I pretty broadly agree with that, and I think it does affect things that I work on, the comparative advantage type thing. I just want to throw out a warning that I think I see a lot of people replace the notion of comparative advantage with what am I best at, and I think that's a very common mistake, and I want to just flag that there's a common mistake to just say comparative advantage means the thing that I'm best at, as opposed to a combination between the thing that I'm best at and the thing that the world actually needs. And I just want to flag that possible failure mode.
Yeah, that's a good point about comparative advantage. Can we get the comment from El Mahdi and also from Yason?
Almost you answered, or I get already answered, but you think we don't have to discriminate the safety of the AGI and AI. Is it almost the same way, and we don't have to discriminate it?
Okay, so your point, I'll write it down. Your point is about is there a difference between AI safety and AGI safety? You wanted to say something. If anyone in the panel wants to address.
Yeah, this is a question I've been switching sides on for the past 12 months. How much safety is actually capacity? So, for example, we discussed robustness. Robustness to poisoning. We have a recent results where we show that you have to trade off, for example, robustness to poisoning if you want to have safe interruptibility, or you have to trade off safe interruptibility to have robustness to poisoning. And when I discussed this with Jan and some of you, we ended up saying maybe robustness to things like poisoning and adversarial example are just capacity questions, which convinced me. So how much of these is actually capacity?
I could take your question to meaning how much can progress in AI actually help us with AGI safety problems? Yeah. And Yason?
Thank you so much. So my question is about non-technical AGI safety and the relationship it has to the research that you're doing. So I'm curious whether you believe there's a gap between the theoretical research that's being conducted and the kind of institutional, economic, political project of building AGI. And yeah, just to hear your thoughts on that topic. Thank you.
Any thoughts from the panel on perhaps Yason's question first? How does your work interact with non-technical AGI safety?
Yeah, I think a lot about the context of governance, and again, matter of reframing. It's one frame to say we're waiting for breakthroughs for, I don't know, if you're looking toward recursive improvement, a self-improving agent, which looks very difficult. As Joshua says, we don't know how to do that. If one is looking through the lens, again, of the AI services model, one sees a path to accelerating incremental automation of AI R&D. That looks like something that moves toward recursive improvement without breakthroughs. It looks like a more distributed process that increases the urgency of problems, shifts the problems, and puts more of the questions into the domain of systemic interactions, which looks more like a governance problem.
Yeah, so I know that your job title is AI macro strategy, so you've definitely got governance in the whole.
Yes, URC grant, AI macro strategy.
Yeah. So on the question of AGI versus AI safety, does anyone find that if you're restricted to the focus on AGI, how does that shift what you find most exciting or confusing or interesting to work on? Perhaps Daniel, something to say on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, so there's a question between AI and AGI in terms of how general a range of tasks you can solve, but I think in my view, maybe the more interesting question is, what level of capability are we operating at? And I think there are some problems that show up when you go well beyond human capabilities, or when you're trying to solve tasks that need to take into account a huge amount of considerations that humans can no longer meaningfully oversee. And I think at that point, some things get a lot harder, right? It's a lot harder to provide good human feedback, and so a lot of our approaches are about having the AI system itself help the human give better feedback. So I think it's absolutely worth thinking about those kinds of problems. That said, I think a lot of work on more subhuman level capabilities is helpful for
AI systems. To do that is, of course, a service.
Yeah.
I would like to interject little remarks of that sort. They're extremely brief.
I just want to plus one that because I think it's not about AGI. It's just it can be narrow but very capable AI in some particular way. And then you get problems like, I have people push on my robots to correct them and learn what they want from that. And it's not the kind of feedback that I can anticipate. You pick a very different task with where the robot, so to say, is now much more capable. You need to elicit different kinds of feedback and interpret them differently.
I think there's certainly a view that there's a spectrum from near term or AI or narrow or whatever word we use for problems that occur for systems of this kind, all the way along and including versions of the problems that are also applicable to far future or AGI or highly capable systems. This is a view that I've just heard you saying I would like to do research all along that spectrum and am motivated by the ones in the nearer term. I'd like to know if there's anyone on the panel who strongly disagrees with that spectrum or thinks that there are important problems that they're particularly motivated by that only appear when you consider highly capable or highly general AI systems.
I have a comment that I think very much builds on that, which is that the services model says that complex, high-level, very general capabilities are composed of tasks. And there's a kind of divide and conquer strategy built into that and a kind of transfer learning in alignment. If I have a system which is tasked with getting people from place to place very rapidly, you could say, well, what about its goals of doing things very rapidly and perhaps needs to know about urban environments and so on. But if what it's calling on is the service of driving people, choosing what mode and choosing driving, and we have systems that have learned to drive in accordance with human values and traffic laws and so on. Now we have a compositionality that many other tasks can be exploited by high-level systems. The high-level systems you have to know about all the details of alignment all the way down. They're intrinsically more safe because they're using, in effect, safe operators.
It seems to me that the services model is very much related to what we've seen in factored cognition and in iterated amplification.
Yes,
it's
those diagrams
there's this intuition that breaking problems down into parts that I see across all of those. I'd like to get back to that question of given those models, does that mean that we can work on the general problem of breaking problems down into subproblems and then not have to worry about anything extra that comes with highly capable AGI?
I think this is not a direct answer. It's kind of in the space of the last three questions, which is that I think that I don't see a strong connection between the kind of solutions that would attack current narrow AI and AGI problems, but I do see a lot of value in using AI as a source of intuitions, using narrow AI as a source of intuitions and data that we can use to make our model better about what AGI is going to be like. And to bring it back to the other question about the humans and such, I think also we can look at humans as a source of what things are going to be like, and we can also look at mathematical models as a source of what things are going to be like. And I think that we're very kind of starved of good data because we're trying to solve all this problem ahead of time, and we kind of have to take what we can get.
Right.
And I'd like to make a comment that I think may correct a potential misconception or misperception. If you have a system of services that is in fact operating at a high level, has high capabilities, there are affordances for control, there are affordances for better understanding, but there is still the potential for emergent behaviors of various kinds, many of which look like classic AGI problems. I very much want to understand from that perspective better, because I think it will help to inform our understanding of systems of systems.
I think, Stuart, I noticed you had your hand up earlier. Do you still have a question you want to ask?
So I think this cuts across everyone's viewpoint, and particularly Jan's question about how do we sort of scale up the volume and rate of production of interesting ideas about safety. It seems to me that the way to do this is to encourage a mindset in the broader AI community that an unsafe AI system is a bad AI system. And one way to do that is just to think about things like liability. So this comes back to governance and regulation and liability. So when you think about car manufacturers, you know, the Pinto lawsuit that said, no, you can't make a completely fragile gas tank that blows up when someone rear-ends you at 5 miles an hour, that meant that gas tank design got a lot safer. You know, brake design in cars has been pretty safe. A complete brake failure leading to a serious accident is quite rare. I would say, on the other hand, tire blowouts probably are more frequent than they should be, and I'm sure there are other kinds of failures. So if we think about canonical kinds of applications where people are starting to put out AI systems in the real world, and probably, given the way the software industry works, completely denying any liability for anything the system software does. So, for example, if you have Alexa, and Alexa buys a $150,000 Ferrari because the television tells it to, rather than the owner tells it to, you know, do you think, I guess Amazon, right, they produce Alexa. Do you think Amazon is then liable for the Ferrari? Probably they deny all liability. They just say, well, you shouldn't have put it next to the television, or you shouldn't have had it tuned to that channel, or, you know, and so on and so forth. So, I think if we look at these applications, say, eat your own dog food, build applications, and then actually use them in the real world. Give them your credit card. You know, put your kids in them. You know, put your senior executives in the self-driving car and have them be driven around with no human safety driver.
Yeah.
And I think that would encourage the much larger number of engineers to, just like bridge builders, all think about safety of the bridge. Yeah. It's not like there's 2 bridge builders who think about safety and another 50,000 bridge builders who couldn't care less. They all do.
So I think the thrust of your comment is about changing mindsets, and there's changing mindsets of the, like, whoever is developing AI at the moment, so that AI safety and AGI safety are both within what they consider part of the problem, and also, like, changing the mindset of society of how we treat our AI systems, so that we, you know, using the example of liability or the analogy to liability, kind of bring the safety mindset more widely. Richard, do you want to?
Can you comment on trying to characterize the transition points where various types of safety concerns will actually become relevant, and perhaps trying to make some more formalized way to communicate that to the ML community at large?
No.
So I think we've got a couple of questions now, and the panel, feel free to answer whichever you want. I'd like you to end with, if you want to, any thoughts on who would be like your ideal student or ideal hire, or like the one thing that if you could press a button, make it happen, you would make happen to improve AGI safety. If anyone has anything to add to that.
Maybe I'll pick on Elmadi's question as I understood it. I think the way I think about it is a trade-off among 3 different things. On the one hand, you have you want to have any kind of guarantees on safety, or you want to be robust. On the other hand, you want to do well with respect to the actual tasks. In a sense, the way I think about it is the actual ground truth utility. And then at the same time, you want to do it without bothering the person too much, with low sample complexity. And I think whatever you can fix one, and then you can choose a trade-off between the other 2. But whatever you do impacts where you are on this triangle. So there's obviously something that we have to decide on, right? Like, what level of safety is good enough, for instance? What is our chance constraint that we want to impose?
I think I can speak to Richard's question. I would like to see a process that develops AI safety guidelines. Initially, ones that align very closely with existing practice, that they're not at all onerous. Existing practice is safe. I mean, it's not leading to catastrophe in any direct way. And then, with that engagement, asking how principles need to be extended and adapted to higher level AI going forward. That's an institutional process that I think is relevant to your question.
Okay, thanks. Thanks everyone for all your wonderful answers, and let's thank the panel.
Thank you.